What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. All right, so I want to talk a little bit more about Giannis Antetokounmpo from a historical perspective. All right, so going into tonight's NBA action on this November 26, 2024, I want to talk about something that Giannis Antetokounmpo, the Milwaukee Bucks, is accomplishing so far this year. Now, there have been years in the past where Giannis has been amongst the NBA leaders in scoring, top 3, top 4. But Giannis this year has really raised his level of play. I mean, in my opinion, even though I could understand if people see Jokic as the league's MVP, but in my opinion, if Giannis wasn't playing for the Milwaukee Bucks, they would have the worst record in the NBA. I'm not even sure this team would have a victory if it wasn't for Giannis. And the way they've clawed back from being on the verge of having a disastrous start like the Sixers, who are like, 3-13 now maybe? And the Bucks, although they still shouldn't be at 8-9, Giannis and Dame and some roster adjustments by the great Doc Rivers, all that has played in, but Giannis Antetokounmpo is the glue that's keeping this team afloat. Right now, Giannis Antetokounmpo is averaging 32.4 points per game in this young NBA season. He's ahead of guys like Jokic, who's over 30. He's a little bit ahead of LaMelo Ball, who was averaging over 30, as hard as it is to believe. I don't know if he's going to keep that up, but he's having, from a numbers perspective, a great year. But, man, he just had one of the worst 50-point outings I've ever seen, man. And ironically, coincidentally, it was against the Bucks. 50 points, but only shot something like, what was it? Was it 15 or 38 from the floor? 6 of 17 from downtown. If that ain't chucking / shot jacking, I don't know what it is, but got no smoke because, well, you know what, I'm not going to go into that. But I just noticed that certain guys don't get the same smoke. Anyway, Anthony Davis also averaged over 30. But anyway, let me get into specifically what I'm talking about when I say Giannis may make NBA history. If you look at the last NBA, the last few decades of NBA scoring champions, you have to go all the way back to the 1958-59 season to find a power forward leading the NBA in scoring. Now, you have to go all the way back there. Now, you could say, well, what about Bob McAdoo? You could say, what about Elvin Hayes? But the thing is, although people do tend to think of Elvin Hayes as a power forward, when he led the league in scoring for the then San Diego Rockets in the 1968-69 season, which was his first year in the league, averaging, I think, 28.4 points per game, he actually was playing center. So for the season, he was playing the center position. Same thing with Bob McAdoo, although Bob McAdoo had stints where he played the power forward position, especially later on in his career. When he won those scoring titles, he was actually playing center for the then Buffalo Braves franchise, which of course went on to become the Clippers franchise. So there, you got to go all the way back to 1958-59 when Bob Pettit won his second scoring title to find a player actually playing the power forward position while also simultaneously leading the league in scoring. I mean, it's like, go all the way back. Last year it was Luka. The year before that it was, what was it? Who won the score title? Was it Embiid? I mean, just think of all the players recently: Embiid, James Harden, Westbrook. I mean, LeBron some years ago, Durant. They've all been point guards, shooting guards, and small forwards or centers. Embiid go all the way back to the '90s with Shaq and Dave Robinson, Jordan. Uh, then you got a whole slew of small forwards: Dominique Wilkins, Bernard King, Alex English, guards, Gervin, Jerry West, the whole. But you got to go all the way back. So Giannis Antetokounmpo, if he can keep this up, and that's a big if, because I suspect his scoring may go down when Chris Middleton comes back. But having said that, Giannis is shooting 61% from the floor, right? So he's not a guy that is a chucker. He's not a guy that's taking a whole bunch of shots to get his points. He's not taking 25, 27 shots a night. So then when say Chris Middleton comes back, he's going back down to 20. Yeah, his shot selection may go down a little. His shot attempts may go down a little bit. But for the most part, he's still going to get probably enough shots to average 30 points a game for the rest of the year. So he has a good shot if he stays healthy and he keeps up the pace um, to win a scoring title. Now, the only thing about that is I don't get the sense that Giannis is as driven by individual accolades. He always indicates that he's only concerned about championships. But let me tell you something. As a Giannis fan, I really do want him to win a scoring title. I really do. You know what I'm saying? And one of the reasons why I want to win a scoring title, because I get so tired of these clowns that say all he does is run up and down the floor and dunk. Mongo Slade, aka James Harden, started that nonsense. All he does is run up and down the floor and dunk. All he does is run up and down the floor and dunk, which is bullshit. You don't average 30 points per game in the NBA if all you do is run run up and down the floor and dunk. You don't win scoring titles unless you have an offensive game. And to be honest with you, Giannis, the way he gets points is a little bit more taxing than, say, a guy that just run up and down the floor and shoot threes all day. He's taxing on his body. The other thing I want to point out, too, is unless I'm wrong here, I think if he finishes averaging around 32 points a game, I could double check this, but I think I'm sure about this. I'm right. I believe Giannis also will set a record if he stays around 32 points a game for the highest scoring season per game average for a power forward in NBA history. If I remember correctly, the highest scoring average for a power forward came once again with Bob Pettit, who I think is criminally underrated. The 1961-62 season for the then St. Louis Hawks, he averaged 31.1, I believe it was, points per game, which was actually higher than any of the scoring seasons he had when he won the scoring title. In 55-56, I think he averaged I want to say 25.7. And then in 58-59, he averaged 29.2, which at the time was the highest scoring average in NBA history. But then the very next year, Wilt Chamberlain comes into the league and then just ups the ante in his rookie year, averages 37.6. But in 61-62, Bob Pettit averages 31.1, which is probably the highest scoring season in NBA history because the same year Wilt averaged 50. That's the same year that Oscar Robertson averaged triple-double. But yeah, that's ironic that Bob Pettit's highest scoring season came when he didn't win a scoring title. Another year, I believe, was 89-90. Karl Malone averaged 31 points per game for the Utah Jazz, but he didn't win a scoring title either that year because of a guy named Michael Jordan, who finished just ahead of him, averaging 33.6 points per game for the Chicago Bulls. That's also the same year that Karl Malone was pissed. There's another tie-in with the Bucks. That was the year that Karl Malone was absolutely pissed that he did not get selected as an all-star starter. Remember that year, a bunch of Laker fanboys voted in AC Green as the All-Star game starting power forward. Don't get me wrong, Asa Green was a really good player, but the fact that he got in ahead of Karl Malone, or was voted ahead, I should say, of Karl Malone, was an absolute travesty. And I think the if I remember correctly, I think the Utah Jazz's last game before the All-Star break was against the Milwaukee Bucks. And for those of you who remember this game, the Utah Jazz beat the absolute shit out of the Milwaukee Bucks. I want to say like by 30-some points. I think the game was at Milwaukee. And Karl Malone had 61 points in 33 minutes. 61 points in 33 minutes. I think he shot like 21 or 26 from the floor in that game. But anyway, if Giannis averages 32 or more, or over 31.2, I should say, if he finishes the season with that, even if he doesn't win the scoring title, he'll set a record for the highest scoring season for a power forward. I believe that's the case. I believe that's I got to think about that for a second, but I believe that is the case. But anyway, regardless of what happens, this man is having a phenomenal NBA season. I think it's also ridiculous that he's not higher in a lot of these MVP rankings. And I'll tell you why I say this. The same media that's penalizing him for saying, well, how could you be an MVP if, your team is only 8-9? You remember these same clowns, the year that, remember when LeBron averaged 30, but the Lakers only were 33 and 49? Remember guys like Kendrick Perkins were actually forming out their mouths? Well, I mean, it's not really his fault that the team is not winning. LeBron should be in the conversation. Remember that? Remember that? See how it was different? They changed the rules for him. But anyway, not only that, but when it comes to Jokic, right, and it's something that pisses me off a little bit about the media. They change the rules all the time when it comes to the MVP argument in Jokic. One year, he deserves the MVP because, the Nuggets have one of the best or the best record in the West or whatever, right? But then another year when Jamal Murray's hurt and they're only 6th seed, they'll say, well, Jokic, man, it's phenomenal what he's doing. He's the only reason this team is in the 6th seed, right? Remember that year? I forgot exactly what year that was, but man, despite the injuries, he's pushing his team into the 6th seed. That's something considering the roster he has. But then these same media members years earlier were poo-pooing why Russell Westbrook won the MVP while being the 6th seed in the West. Oh, how can you give an MVP to a guy that's in the 6th seed? See, your bias is showing. But I remember these things. But there's definitely a bias. Also, what happened to the fatigue factor? Remember when Giannis won his second consecutive league MVP, the excuse in the media was, well, we can't keep giving it to Giannis. There's a certain fatigue factor that exists. But it seems like there's a never-ending thirst to give Joker an MVP. I never hear a fatigue factor to play with Joker. Never. It's never there. Every year, they seem eager to give him that award. Am I lying? Somebody tell me I'm lying. Even if you like Joker, I'm not lying. And you know it. You're going to make excuses, but I'm not lying. But anyway, salute to Giannis Antetokounmpo. Tell me what you guys think.